All right, everybody, welcome to the Man Talk Show. I am being joined by Dr. Marisa Franco, who is a psychologist, a professor, New York Times bestselling author whose work translates the science of attachment into practical tools for developing and building deeper friendships, stronger relationships, and what we're here to talk about today, which is lasting self-worth. I can't wait to get into it. Welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited to chat with you about this today.
Yeah. I mean, I was saying to you before we even hit record that self-worth has become a really core theme within a lot of the content and stuff that I've been putting out, mostly because it's become a core theme that I'm seeing so many men struggling with.
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of start there. What are some of the main maybe misinterpretations that people have about the differences between self-worth and self-esteem and the different roles that they play within us?
Yeah. So self-esteem is basically that you report that you feel good about yourself. You feel positively about yourself. But as I delved into the research, something fascinating I found was that people with high self-esteem, there's two different types. One that treats everybody like crap and is very hostile towards others, and another that is very kind and compassionate and has the best relationships of everyone. And so as I started to explore that, I was like, what's going on there? And what I realized is that one type of high self-esteem, they compartmentalize all negative feelings about themselves. They try to push it away, avoid that. And what happens is if anyone critiques them, anyone cuts them off, anyone, is having a bad day and not particularly affirming, all of those compartmentalized feelings hijack them and come out, and they get very reactive and they get very hostile. And so I realized that just using that definition of self-esteem, feeling good about yourself, will actually not work, right? Because that can be because we kind of delude ourselves and avoid the parts of ourselves in pain. So I wanted to define true self-worth as being able to feel everything inside of you. And that's from an attachment standpoint. Specifically, there's this concept called sensitivity, which means I acknowledge and recognize all that I feel, and responsiveness. I do something about my feelings. If I'm stressed out over a deadline, I might ask for more time, for example. So it's not about avoiding or escaping yourself. It's about fully experiencing every aspect of your internal world in a grounded way.
That becomes instantaneously problematic for a lot of guys.
It's hard stuff.
Feeling and acknowledging everything inside of you.
So hard.
I think back to like my 20s. I think early to mid 20s me would have been like,
well, yeah.
I hear that. I understand that might be true, and I'm going to continue to operate in a dysfunctional fashion.
Well, here's the thing, Connor. You can't regulate what you don't acknowledge, right? I mean, we think we can, but whatever we don't acknowledge comes back to hijack us and our relationships.
I think in the book, you talk about this sort of counterintuitive aspect, which is that the things that we typically use to boost our self-esteem are the things that often backfire.
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about that piece, and maybe, how does something like positive self-talk or optimistic self-talk for some people make them feel worse?
Yeah. So really interesting research on people with low self-esteem, that when you compliment them, they feel like they're having an identity crisis. Oh my God, you perceive me so positively. That's not how I perceive myself. This is so much pressure. When they get positive feedback, their blood pressure rises. A more committed spouse, a more positive spouse, they're less committed to. Even when positive things happen to them, months later, they get sicker. And so what exactly is happening here? You can think about self-esteem as a theory of self, that I think if my self-esteem's low, I think people will reject me and bad things will happen to me. Now, when positive things happen, it feels like manipulation. You're trying to lull me into a false sense of positivity or security when ultimately I'm going to get rejected. And if that's true, it's adaptive for you to keep your self-esteem low, right? If I'm going to raise my self-esteem in response to these compliments and I'm just going to get harmed again, I'm going to plummet more deeply. And so I think of low self-esteem as adaptive given the theory of self that you hold.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about what are some of the conditions, the behaviors, the experiences that people normally experience that end up producing low self-esteem.
Yeah. So one researcher put it, I really like this, that memories are the database of self-esteem. And so if you have low self-esteem, you have been rejected, maybe abused, bullied, harmed, and importantly, you haven't actually processed or integrated those experiences. They are what's called open memories, which are memories we have that are kind of unresolved. We don't understand why they happen to us. We still try to avoid them. They still trigger a lot of emotions. And so memories don't just record the past, according to researchers. They also predict the future. And so part of us thinks, because I've been through this, that this is going to happen to me again. And that's why we see with people that struggle with self-esteem that success is threatening, again, lulling me into a false sense of self. Positive or healthy relationships could be threatening. Again, like you don't actually see me. You don't actually know who I am. When you do, you're going to really reject me. And so it's like, if we don't work on our sense of self, the beauties of life become threats. The beauties of life slip off of us because they don't match our pre-existing theory.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought about it as like these, the past memories, the memories and the experiences of the past become a predictor of our future state if we don't integrate, understand, and heal them.
Absolutely.
And I definitely found that to be true for myself. I had very low self-esteem in my late teens and 20s because of this stuff that I experienced as a kid, and which I've talked openly about on the show. But those things were, those memories and those experiences were a kind of constant precursor for how I viewed my own behaviors, my internal thoughts, how I've showed up in relationships. So that makes a ton of sense.
I know.
What about the conditions and the states that produce high self-esteem? And should we aim for a high self-esteem or should we be aiming for solid self-worth?
Yeah.
Or does it matter?
Yeah. Affirmation, acceptance, belonging, people liking you in your most authentic state, people being curious about your internal world. Should we be aiming for high self-esteem? Well, I'll tell you a story. I was going to save this one to the end, but I told my friend Steven, he's a professor out in California, about this book, Unworthiness. And he was like, worthiness, that sounds like you're still evaluating yourself. What you're looking for is, it sounds like it's beyond evaluation. And I was like, yeah, it shouldn't be called I am worthy. It should be called I am. Like, we are looking, the final step here is to get to a state of self-expression where we're just comfortable with our internal world. We're comfortable expressing it. Rather than that. And that's why I kind of pull away from self-esteem a little, because it's sort of like we're still evaluating ourselves. And what does it mean to take away evaluation and just, or sort of like organically be as we are in the world, like be in an organic state of authenticity?
It's interesting because a lot of the men that I've worked with, especially in the last few years, are very high success, high achieving men, whether it's in sports or music or entrepreneurship. And it's interesting how there's kind of this theme with many of the guys that I work with where they present as having a very high self-esteem image, but then their core foundation of worth internally that's very hidden is quite low. And that usually is a byproduct of their attachment early on in life. And so it's kind of funny because it's like, the way I like to think about it is there's this meticulously manicured house that you see that's sitting on top of this very fragile foundation and cracked foundation. And it's challenging because I think a lot of the work that sometimes is presented to us through self-help or personal development or even therapy sometimes is like manicuring the house instead of working on the foundation. And so can you just speak to that, how some of the sources, because I think you're right about this in the book, about how some of the frameworks that are out there really don't help to sort of address the core foundation?
Yeah. So funny, because I wrote my first book, Platonic, on becoming securely attached. And then this book, I start to question attachment theory, and not specifically more like how we're utilizing it, which is like secure attachment is becoming a status symbol. And so many people feel like, I need to be secure. I need to be secure. So much so that they are ignoring and avoiding the parts of themselves that aren't. And if we neglect the parts of ourselves that are anxious or avoidant, or we shame those parts because we're like, no, I need to be secure. I'm secure. I'm secure. I'm secure. We are ironically enacting on those parts of ourselves the same harm that made us insecure in the first place. And so what I say in the book is like, the goal is not to be secure, maybe to be secure-ish, so that we have room to acknowledge and love and have compassion for the parts of ourselves that don't feel that way. What if attachment no longer has a hierarchy? What if attachment style is just about us being more honest about expressing where we're at and what we need, rather than acting out on behalf of those attachment styles? What if we're allowed to acknowledge that I'm anxious and avoidant so that we can turn towards those parts and care for those parts? Because again, the parts of ourselves that we leave in the shadows, they don't heal. We need to turn towards those parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I think I get exactly what you're saying. And I think that's tough. I'm always trying to put myself in the position of the guys that are tuning into this. And I think it's tough for a lot of guys that are like, well, aren't I doing this work to be fixed?
Yeah.
Like, aren't I doing this work to be whatever we want to call it, right? Healed, fixed, good, solid.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that? Because I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's like an acceptance piece that doesn't happen when we're coming from this place of sort of like relentless, I need to be
secure,
perfect or fixed. Or like, yeah.
You know, there's this poet, Marion Woodman, and she says, it is easier to try to be better than who you are than to be who you are. And that feels so true. I mean, I'm called out too when I say that. But I think when we think about healing and what that actually means in a way that doesn't feel manicured and performative, in a way that feels genuine and thorough, it is about accepting who you are. Because the reason that these parts of you are acting out or feeling unhealed or like crippling your sense of self is because we've turned away from them. And so worthiness isn't about having to change who you are, having to get the right job, get the right romantic partner. It really is about accepting whoever you are now, that is worthy. And it's not about having to change that as much as it is having to reconcile with that, having to love that, having to offer compassion, acceptance, understanding for those parts of you.
Is there a line between acceptance and there's genuinely elements of myself that I want to improve?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of famous psychologists like Carl Rogers has this quote, like he's a popular psychologist, humanistic therapy. He says, I accept myself and then I change. It's hard to change what you don't even know or understand about yourself. And so it's not that this acceptance piece is like, you know, you can never change or you can never work on yourself or you can never fix yourself, but rather it's a more genuine and true version of change when you actually confront and allow where you are at right now, right? Because it's not like I'm changing because of shame. I'm changing because I'm trying to escape. I'm changing because it feels urgent. I am changing from a place of love and from a place of stability and from a place of groundedness. And so I think that feels like a lot more of a integrated version of change compared to this part of myself is unacceptable and I need to do something about it.
Yeah, I have found that over the years of working with men, how the majority of men, we tend to tackle our internal issues with a certain kind of like hostility, I guess you could say, or aggression. I've certainly found this in myself when I first started going to therapy or doing personal development work, where the biggest challenge that I faced in moving the needle, I guess you could say, on my own self-worth or even in my self-esteem was that I was trying to literally kill off the parts of myself that I didn't like. And I was like, oh, I don't like that part of myself. It's weak or it's bad or it's not good. And so what do I need to do to eradicate this aspect of my behavior or my thinking? And I think that's a very masculine conditioned modality to deal with our internal issues. How does that strategy then impact self-esteem and self-worth?
That's a good question. And honestly, it's something that I relate to. When I've been on my own healing journey, I felt like I was like pulling a dog across the street on its hind legs. Get better, get better. Very like compulsive and coercive version of healing. But now it's just like, I've written something about this in the book, like just wanting to have regard for my insecurities, love for my insecurities. And, you know, those parts of us that are flawed, they are carrying the pain so that the rest of us isn't, right? Like that part of you is doing work for your entire sense of self. It's doing something for you. It's trying the best that it can in the memories in which that part of you inhabits, right? And so, when, like I said before, I think when we try to kind of push those parts of us away, and I can share a story from the book of this man who his son was crying. His son was crying all night. He tried to comfort him. Son keeps crying. And what's coming up for him is this part of him that I don't feel worthy as a father. This kid continues to show me that I don't feel worthy as a father. I feel ashamed of myself as a father, right? And there's an opportunity to sit with that and say, you know, I offer myself that care. I'm trying my best. You know, things are really hard. And I want to show up for this kid, but I know that I need to take care of myself first. And that might have changed the outcome. But because that was a part of himself that he didn't want to look at, these feelings of unworthiness, this shame he didn't want to he wanted to push away. He goes to his kid's room and he just starts yelling at him until this kid is so afraid that he goes silent. And that was the last night his son called him dad. And it breaks his heart to this day. And so I think we just have this misconception that these parts of me that I'm ashamed of, that I want to kill off, that they will just die, but they will not die. They will hijack you in the present until you give them the attention and the love and the care that they need. And so it's a misconception for all of us that I can try to obliterate parts of myself into healing. Those parts of you are still going to be there, but it's going to be their sort of more shadowy, more antisocial version of you, where you almost no longer lack control of how that part of you comes out.
So good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because I think for a lot of guys, it's almost so preconditioned into us that that is the strategy and the mode that we should operate in. And it really is hard to almost move against that inclination, you know, like this internal, like, oh, this is how I respond to something unwanted or unworthy. But there's always a price to pay. You know, there's a trade-off. If you're going to try and annihilate that part of yourself, the trade-off is going to be that you are, you know, incomplete. It's like hating your foot, you know, your right foot so vehemently that you're like, I'm going to cut this off, you know, like I'm like, this is done. And then, you know, you are less than because of it. Or if you pretended like it didn't exist, you're going to have some phantom symptoms. So I understand that. In the book, you talk about this concept of memory reconsolidation. And I don't think a lot of people are familiar with this concept. So for people that haven't heard of it and how to actually deploy it, what does it do? How does it function? And why does it hold so much promise for lasting change? Because I think it's part of the core tool, one of the tools that you talk about.
So we've talked about memories being the database of self-esteem. And that kind of sucks because it's like, well, that already happened. So what can I do? I can't change the past. Am I just going to feel bad about myself forever? And no, you don't have to feel bad about yourself forever because of something called memory reconsolidation. This is this theory that when we revisit a negative memory, we can fundamentally change the way that it sits in our brain. And so you have people that maybe, you know, went back to a memory. For example, one person in the research said that they almost drowned and their parents didn't see them, right? And you think about either the positives that came out of that. My parents showed me a lot of care in the aftermath and told me we can go anywhere on any trip that I wanted. Or you intervene in that memory as your current self and give yourself the love that you need. And so for the guy, the story that I just mentioned, he was abandoned by his father, and he remembers being at his father's a funeral and seeing the back of his father's head and not even wanting to like acknowledge him because he already felt so abandoned. And so that would look like going back to that memory and saying maybe to that young self, like, how he's reacting to you isn't about you. You have nothing wrong with you. He wasn't able to take care of himself in the way that he needed. And that's why he's treating you this way, not because anything is wrong with you. Being able to tell yourself what you needed. And what we find is that it's kind of inner child work, I guess. Some people may be familiar with that when people do that, it changes. They see changes in the hippocampus, which is where we store memories in the brain. They see increases in self-esteem, for example, after people do that. And so the book, Worth, I have all of these exercises for you to revisit these memories that are driving your low sense of self and to fundamentally change the emotional tenor of those memories. And that's possible because memories are not made to record the past. They are made to predict the future. And so if we update them, they can better predict the future.
Is it a fair assessment to say that sort of two things? One, your brain is a big part of it is a pattern recognition machine,
Yes.
and that how it's recognizing patterns in your present moment is through past-based memories?
Yes, there's actually part of our brain, don't want to get too jargony, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. And it just literally, if something happens now that reminds me of my past, it's literally rummaging through my past memories to recreate in my body the same sensation that I had back then. So it's like, why am I reacting so strongly? Because my friend didn't text me back. Because my body's literally replaying what it was like to be abandoned as a 2-year-old, right? And so I think that I really like knowing that because sometimes it can feel like, oh my God, why am I having this strong reaction? We shame ourselves for it. But actually, that's how our brains work. They use the past experience to determine our present experience. And so if you're reacting strongly, it's not a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that you have a memory that's still hot, a memory that's still active and open that's really shaping your experience of the present. There's this great psychoanalyst, Philip Bromberg, and he says, people don't go to therapy to deal with what's happened then. They go to therapy to deal with what's happening now, because all of those memories are continuing to shape your experience of the present. It wasn't just that I got bullied and I have to, go back to that bullying experience. It's that now you're feeling bullied at work because of that experience. Now you're seeing that bullying everywhere because of that experience.
I'm assuming that part of what you're saying with this memory reconsolidation is not a process of logically trying to rewire the memory, but more so sort of shifting the emotional context.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I looked into the research on memories, there were people that had gone through kidnappings or fires or harm, abuse, rejection. And when they recalled those memories, it wouldn't affect their self-esteem. And then there were people that would recall those memories and it would, and they would report feeling worse. And the difference between that was whether the memory was an open memory. An open memory is something that's unresolved. You still can't make sense of it. It still triggers emotion in you. You might want to avoid it. And so it's about closing those open memories, is about putting in a new emotional experience into the memory. And so it is really, if it's a memory that it sounds really bad, but it no longer triggers any feeling, emotion in me, I'm not trying to avoid it. I have a sense of why it happened. It's integrated, right? That's not going to affect our self-esteem, our sense of self-worth, as compared to those memories we haven't integrated, we haven't come to terms with, we haven't felt our way through, we haven't developed meaning out of.
It's interesting. Okay, there's so many different pathways I want to go on this, but now I'm starting to nerd out a little bit inside. But it's interesting because I think a lot of the sort of traditional self-help is sort of focused in on new behaviors, new methods of viewing things. Here's a new framework from which you can operate.
Yeah.
But it really sounds like what you're talking about with memory reconsolidation is not about trying to install a new belief in the present moment, but it's actually about sort of shifting the emotional charge around the initial belief.
Yes.
Is that right?
That is right. But I will say there's a competing theory to memory reconsolidation called retrieval competition theory. And so let me not hit you with so much jargon, but retrieval competition, the idea is that our sense of self is determined by which memories are most salient. And so saliency is also part of it. So if you develop a bunch more positive memories and positive experiences, those can become more salient for you and you can feel better about yourself. So I would say probably those other self-help movements are working from more of a a retrieval competition theory framework, which I don't think is wrong. I mean, that's also helpful. For me as a control freak, I'm like, yeah, but the negative memories are still there and they could come out at any time if I'm in the right context. So I kind of want to just make sure they're not there at all instead of like, I don't know, having more data to use. And so I do go into retrieval competition in one chapter of the book, which is on like stigma. If you have like a stigmatized identity, because you're always going to be having this new memories that relate to negative experience of that identity. And so you have to build up a big store of positive ones to balance them out, because you can't keep reconsolidating if society keeps telling you suck over and over and over again. But yeah, I would say that's probably the difference between the self-help work you're referring to and the kind that I'm talking about in the book.
And okay, so we're kind of talking about updating maybe what we could label as fractured memories or damaged memories or painful memories, and the stories that we've been telling ourselves. Just as an example, like what does that look like from a practice perspective? Can you walk us through like a little bit of an example? Because oftentimes I find that the guys that listen are like, okay, how do I do that?
Read the book.
What do I do?
I will go in depth. But just to give you like a little bit of a teaser here, I would ask you to think about a memory that feels like it still affects you, that still triggers feelings or emotions, still shapes how you see yourself, that you haven't necessarily developed resolve. This is the kind of things you would bring up in therapy, for example. I would ask you how that memory affects how you see yourself and how you see the world. I would ask you to walk through the memory in as much detail as possible in the present tense. I'm walking through the room. I see my father. And to use all 5 of your senses. I smell this. I see this. I remember touching the couch, right? So that's to really re-trigger the memory to the maximum extent possible. And then you can say like, okay, now picture your current self in the memory. What would you tell yourself at the time? And so you say the thing that you needed to hear at the time, the thing that you wish, if there was, if you wish someone was there to bring you through that experience, what would they tell you? And as you tell yourself this, you really want this to carry emotional weight. You want to feel the emotion of those words. And then you ask yourself, okay, is there anything else that myself at the time wants from me now? Is that complete? Or does that, my hurting self, are there anything else they would ask for? And then after you do that, you're probably crying at this point. That's what I've seen when I do this transformative memory work. You then write down how you now see yourself and how you now see the world, given the new interpretation of this memory.
Awesome. Thank you. Are you, as we're talking about this, are you familiar with Dr. Alan Shore's work on like the neuroscience of like right brain psychology and the formation of? Oh man,
Tell me
it's so
about
fascinating. Well, it's interesting because it's more around like how the development of the right brain is sort of the storehouse for the unconscious and simultaneously the foundational pieces of our attachment, and how early life really forms a lot of how you're going to relate from an unconscious perspective to attachment. And yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that he talks about is how do we start to deal with these nonverbal or pre-verbal experiences that then live inside of us from ruptures that we had that existed or happened before we have a memory of it. And oftentimes I've found that sometimes is what guys are grappling with. Is like, oh, I don't have this, acute moment of this memory that was super harmful and painful, but this disruption to my self-worth is just so prominent and present and like, it lives inside of me. And so anyway, he's just got some really fascinating research.
Yeah. I mean, I want to add to that what you're talking about in the research, it's called implicit memory, which are things we don't remember that still affect our emotions now, our sense of self now, how we're reacting to the world. And there's really interesting research, like how does implicit memory happen? Well, it's because our hippocampus, which records the scene of an event, almost like you're playing a video of the memory. But then you have your amygdala, which captures the emotion of the event and the feelings associated with the event. And you can have a powered down hippocampus and an active amygdala. And so you're still capturing the emotional impact of the event, even though you don't remember that it happened. And there's this really interesting study where people were presented with a blue slide, and then a loud noise. Blue slide, loud noise, blue slide, loud noise. People with a damaged hippocampus were like, I don't remember what color slide came with the noise, but they would then be presented just with the blue slide, and you would see they're starting to sweat. You would see they're starting to sweat, even though they don't remember, their body's remembering. Now, people with a damaged hippocampus, they would see the blue slide. Sorry, people with the, what did I say? I said the damaged hippocampus, damaged amygdala. They would see the blue slide. They would say, yes, the blue slide came with the loud noise. But once after they were presented with it so many times, the blue slide showed them again, they weren't sweating. Their body did not remember that memory. And so when we're children, our hippocampus isn't fully developed, but our amygdala a lot more developed. So we are internalizing these experiences at an emotional level, even though we can't intellectually access those memories. And so those implicit memories, they can really affect our sense of self, given how kids are really taking in the world as it is, and not like the sort of confirmation bias of adulthood where I'm just seeing what happened before. And so they're really kind of vulnerable to what's happening around them because they're not filtering reality through their preconceived notions, through their preconceived theories. And so if harm happens, it's not like, oh, I have this past experience of all this affirmation or belonging, and so this harm isn't affecting me as much. It's just harm happens. It gets deeply internalized. So we have to be able to work through our implicit memories too.
So self-worth is how we perceive ourselves to be, like how we perceive ourselves to be capable, how we are able to perform, whether we're good or not, etc. How would you sort of define self-worth?
I would define self-worth as the ability to feel everything from a grounded place. It is, for securely attached kids, they have this experience of their parents helping them identify their feelings. It's called sensitivity, and responsiveness. Their parents helping them respond to oh, you're really sad. You might need a hug, repeatedly. And so people that feel truly worthy in adulthood, they're doing this for themselves. I interviewed someone secure. I asked people to direct me to secure people in their lives. And he would say, at the end of the day, I would sort of move my hand over the day and see where my energy lies. Where did I have energy? Where did I have a trigger? And so instead of this fear of my negative emotions, this desire to run away from them, there's this desire to know every part of myself, even every emotion. So there's no part of me that I am losing by estranging myself from my internal world. And so, I really learned from these people that they're willing to feel even the smallest feeling because that is a precious part of themselves that they don't want to let go. But Connor, I have to say, for some people, this sounds scary. If they turn towards their feelings, they feel like they're going to be overwhelmed. And that makes sense from a memory reconsolidation standpoint. If what you're feeling now is the culmination of so many things you haven't felt, it's very overwhelming. And that's why the memory work helps us attune to our emotions in the now. But not only that, when we see in the research, people that simply observe their feelings are worse than people that ignore them. But it's the observation and acceptance piece of my feelings. So you have to be able to acknowledge all your feelings, but then also care and regulate those feelings. So for me, that looks like hand on my chest. I'm okay. Like I'm safe. Like every time you acknowledge the feeling, it has to come with the care, the regulation that you may have never had.
It's funny, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about sitting at the dinner table last night with my family and my son, who's 5. It was just having a meltdown. I don't even remember what it was about. It's all meltdowns as a parent just could like turn into a blur. It's like I have no idea what the meltdown was about, but he was sitting in his chair and he was crying. Maybe he didn't want to eat his rice or something like that. And I just looked at him and I was like, "Buddy, you're having a hard time." And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Do you want a hug?" And he's like, "No." I was like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want a hug." And, and he came over, and he gave him a hug, and then he felt better after, and it was all good. But it's interesting because I think it's these little sort of seemingly simple things, and what I've noticed is that the majority of men that I've worked with, we conflate performance with self-worth.
Yeah.
It's like how well I can perform equals how worthy or valuable I perceive myself to be. But the more sort of research I've done on this, the more I found that that's not true. And that's kind of what you're saying, right? Is that self-worth doesn't actually have to do with performance and how well you do things. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Like I think the people that have the highest self-worth, they have high regard for themselves no matter how they perform. You don't have to be a success to be worthy. You don't have to look a certain way to be worthy. You don't have to have a certain familial structure to be worthy, right? It's no matter who I am, I have high regard for myself. My worth isn't contingent on me being a certain type of way. And instead, my goal is to just simply know all of who I am.
Is there a place where that enters into delusion? Like if somebody's like, I'm okay no matter how I look and feel and no matter who I am, but then they're out of alignment with their values. Is that, because like I think for a lot of guys, they do value certain things. And I find that for some people, there's like a false sense that can sometimes creep in modern culture.
Yeah.
And this notion of like, well, I think maybe that ties back into the self-esteem piece. Like I'm lovable no matter what, no matter how I look, act, or feel, or how I treat people, right? Because I do think that there are certainly people that are like, well, I'm lovable no matter what.
Like
and
narcissism.
What that actually means is I'm lovable no matter how I treat you, even if it's like shitty, you know, and like, yeah, I say that I'm tolerant, but I'm actually, you know, harsh and cruel and mean when it comes down to it. So I guess I'm kind of answering my own question, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. I'm thinking about like what you're talking about almost sounds like a kind of like self-aggrandizement that we have to see ourselves the best. And like, you know, no matter what I do, I'm great and I'm awesome. But I think true self-worth and self-acceptance, it comes from a reckoning with the truth. It comes from being able to say, I'm not treating people well, right? And the person that's invested in self-aggrandizement, they're not going to be able to admit that flaw. They're not going to be able to admit, oh, everybody loves me. I'm fine. I'm beloved by everybody, right? But true self-worth is I can commit harm and not feel like I can make a mistake and I'm not a mistake of a person, right? And that actually makes us better people. Because when we feel so hurt and so harmed and like I'm so bad, we become self-absorbed. Pain makes us self-absorbed. But instead, when we see these people that are basically self-compassionate towards themselves, that's what really defines the people with high self-esteem who actually treat people well. When you're able to say, I made a mistake and I am not a mistake, that's when you have the capacity to apologize to other people. That's when you have the capacity to acknowledge the harm that you caused because it's not so threatening foundationally to your sense of self. And so I think this true sense of self-worth, it's about being able to live in the truth, which is that we are all make mistakes, which is that we're not always going to perform well, and having that be okay, which ironically makes us better because we are now more well-resourced because we are less threatened.
Yeah, it's. I think what I hear you saying is really like the separating personhood from behavior.
Exactly.
Being able to, I practice this a lot with my son because it's not something that I got at all, and it took me a long frickin' time to get this because I had a lot of shame. You know, it's like I did something bad, and I was like, "Oh, I'm such a piece of crap," like you know, and that would play out. And so with my son, you know, if he makes a mistake or breaks one of the rules, it's like you're a good boy and you know did something wrong, or you know you're a good boy and you made a bad choice, and that choice isn't okay, or that behavior is not okay. And so I think that that's certainly something that we as men can embody and practice. I think what I'm trying to point to is, again, I'm trying to put myself into the listener's shoes and a lot of the men that I've worked with. And what I see with guys is that there's this battle that happens. And I'm trying to describe the battle. And I think the battle is something along the lines of, I hear what you're saying, Dr. Franco. I need to accept who I am as I am. But how do I do that and also acknowledge that there are genuinely parts of me that need to be improved, right? It's like I can accept myself for being critical sometimes or harsh or whatever, and I want to save a bit more money, and I want to be nicer to my kids, and I want to be in better shape or whatever it is, right? I'm just throwing out examples. And I think a lot of the times for guys, the acceptance and the genuine acknowledgement of improvement feel contradictory,
Right.
but you're saying that they can
are
coexist.
not even that they can coexist, but they ultimately, acceptance is the only pathway to like integrated change. Like, okay, so let's think about this. I feel like I remember this example from one of the books I read. Let's say you're a coach on a basketball team and someone sucks and you're just like, you suck. You can't make any shots. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, I don't even know. This is embarrassing. Why are you on the team? Like, is this kid going to get better? No, they're probably going to feel so humiliated that they're going to get discouraged and they're not even going to try to change anymore. But let's say you're like, hey, I see you're really trying, and maybe it's that you don't really have the right shoes. So it's like kind of hard for you to walk around, and I noticed that like when you try to like shoot the ball, you're holding your hands a little lower, and maybe you put them a little higher. And it's like, I have faith in you to improve. And when I actually try to take the time to turn towards you and understand what the underlying issue is and the underlying problem is, then I can give you tips for growth that actually get at the root problem, right? And that's what happens when we turn towards ourselves. We turn towards our shame, right? Like, I can give myself the medicine that is fully attuned to the root and core issue. But if I'm just trying to push away that shame, it's like throwing a dart. I don't actually know what I need to move forward. I have no self-awareness as to what is that pain and what does that pain need from me? What do I need to hear? Right. Because I'm just avoiding it. And so it's just like, we can't cure a disease that we haven't acknowledged existed. And again, I don't like to talk about our flaws like diseases, but just to give a metaphor that people can, kind of clutch onto. Like, if you continue to be like, I don't have cancer, you're not going to cure your cancer. If you're instead like, okay, this is what the situation is. Here's what I might need to get better. Here's the treatment options that are available to me. How do I show myself the care that I need? You're going to actually get better.
Yeah, I feel like there's sort of two sides to this because, and I should be clear, like the reason why I keep going in on this one is because it's such a quagmire for a lot of men. And usually it's the non-acceptance that's preventing them from being able to shift and move forward. Yeah. It's like, I don't actually accept this. It just needs to get better. It just needs to improve because there's something fundamentally wrong with me or this behavior or whatever it is. And on the other side, so that becomes a block for acceptance, and then that keeps them stuck. Yeah. But then on the other side, I think there's a fear that a lot of guys have of, well, if I accept this, then maybe I'll never improve. Yeah. Maybe I'll just accept it, and then I won't actually create any shift or any change. Yeah. So that becomes a second part of the sort of obstacle that a lot of guys face, because I think we see that out in the world. I think there's maybe you disagree on this, but I do think that in the culture right now there is a kind of unhealthy push for complete acceptance of almost anything, any behavior, any way of being, and I think that some guys have a challenge with that, where it's like, well, so I'm just supposed to accept like how everything is and just love that I'm like broke and out of shape and single and like that I fucking hate my life. Like, I'm just supposed to accept all that, and like I'm not supposed to do anything about it. But that's not what you're saying, right? Is that it's not just like accept and then nothing.
Yeah, I think maybe I hear what you're saying. I do. And I feel like maybe there's some like nuance we need to pull apart with acceptance. That acceptance isn't just like, what do you think of this? Like sort of like, almost like the superficial acceptance that it's like, this isn't a problem anymore, period. But what I'm talking about in acceptance is actually going more deeply into the problem, not thinking that the problem is just okay and it's fine and it's, now I can just be at rest, but like, actually I need to go more deeply and explore this to a certain amount of depth. I need to get to the root of it. And so it's not a superficial thing, this act of acceptance where I'm just like, check it on the list. Like, it's fine that I never exercise and, but like, what's the deeper thing that's going on with me? What's the deeper thing that's happening there? What is the pain that's at the root of this? What sort of care do I need to offer myself? So it's it's something maybe deeper than the word acceptance conveys. And I don't even know what the right term for it is, but it's almost like it's about healing. It's about healing, and healing requires us to turn towards love, have compassion for. I mean, I feel like I'm being a broken record right now, for those parts of ourselves that are in pain. So it's about going deeper. Emotion recollected in tranquility is how William the Wordsworth describes it. Going deeper into that emotion, deeper in a grounded way, deeper into that self-exploration, rather than being like, well, that's there and that's fine. I hope that differentiation might help a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think how I've always looked at it is like, when we can accept that is true about us, whatever it might be, something that we felt, something that we experienced, something that we've done, then we are creating a more coherent relationship with reality.
Yes.
And because truth is where reality exists, I believe.
Yes.
And when we can come into relationship with that, in contact with that, then it shifts us out of being against the truth, because we're usually in opposition to the truth. I don't like this. I hate this. This makes me wrong. This is evidence that I'm broken or dysfunctional or whatever it is. And that creates an oppositional relationship with truth and reality.
Yeah, it's almost like, what if this flaw was meant to be here? What if this flaw is doing something for you? What if it is carrying pain that the rest of you is not having to carry? Like, what if this dysfunction is quite functional? And in what context is it functional for you? What's the world? What's the memory that this part of you is living in? And so it's maybe acceptance, or you could say like deep exploration, I think, of self, and that's exactly what you said, Connor. Like, it's about being able to live in a sense of reality rather than resisting reality, which takes so much out of us that, again, we have less resources to actually change who we are.
How do some of these how does low self-worth show up in behaviors relationally? What might that look like?
Defensiveness, aggressiveness, random hostility, complete withdrawal, a lot of fight or flight activation where you're just not in a grounded place, because, this process of acknowledging how you feel and offering yourself care, like, that regulates you. So you're able to approach problems from it's almost like you really know who you are, because I think when we're constantly in reactivity, like, that's not really us, that's us being hijacked. And so it's like, if you're always in reactivity, you don't actually have a genuine expression of self. You're like doing these like survival tactics that are sort of separate from your genuine and authentic place, because foundation of authenticity is safety. And so we only know who we are when we feel safe. And the problem is, when we're always resisting our internal parts, they never feel safe enough for us to know who we are authentically. And so anything where you're just trying to escape or avoid something relationally, I can't talk about this with you. This is actually your fault. Let me put this back on you. Like, you're making a big deal, right? What's underneath that is like, you have touched some shame that I haven't touched in myself, that I have been trying to avoid. And right now it's going to take over. And I'm not even going to be able to bear the truth of what you're saying, because it's going to incapacitate me enough and make me into a person that is unable to be caring for you because my pain is so loud.
I think one of the other things that I have found, and I think you write about this as well, is this correlation between people who are a little bit more low self-worth really struggle to receive goodness, praise, validation. Yeah. And there's like a rejection strategy that happens because it goes against the internal experience. So can you speak to that? And how can a man who rejects goodness, closeness, intimacy, compliments, praise, how can he begin to turn that around?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you have low self-worth, anything positive, you have an inability to process love. Like, that's really what low self-worth is, because it's seen as a threat.
No big deal.
It's really seen as a threatening thing. You're trying to lull me into feeling good when some harm is going to befall me. And so I realized, because I have friends that don't accept compliments, and I've been like, you have to accept this compliment, that is not that's not it, because in their world, it's really threatening. And it's
you're like, receive my love, damn it.
Exactly. And it's like, no, because it's not felt as love for you. It's felt as pressure. It's felt as anxiety. It's felt as I'm going to let you down. It's felt as the shoe's going to drop eventually, all this anticipatory anxiety. Right. And so if that's you, if that's your theory of self, like, this is the book for you, because the whole book is filled with exercises as to like, what is behind that for you? What has happened to you before that has made you assume that this threat is going to reoccur? What is that threat? How can you revisit the threat? And one thing we didn't talk about, Connor, is like, what if it's a pre-verbal threat? And for that part, I talk about the work of Peter Levine. He's this great psychologist who has worked with implicit memory, body-based memories, and just emotional memories that aren't actually remembered. And what he noted was that when these cheetahs attacked the gazelle, I think it was a gazelle, maybe it was another similar animal, but the gazelle, these wild animals, they never got traumatized. The gazelle didn't get traumatized, even though it was literally in the cheetah's clutches about to get eaten. And he was like, why isn't the gazelle getting traumatized when all of us human beings are getting traumatized so easily? Like, what's the difference there? And he would see that these gazelles, they would just like shake, 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 almost like they're being electrocuted after they went through this near-death experience. And he started to think about trauma, not even, and when I say trauma, I don't mean something life-threatening. I mean something that has instilled itself in your nervous system, shaping your sense of the world to come. Trauma is this excess energy that our triggers are a way of trying to release that energy that's not quite effective. And what he sees in the research is that when you look at rats that have been traumatized, shock, 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 if they're able to fight or flee, they have less health problems because they were able to release that energy. And when you look at people that suffer the most from PTSD, they didn't fight. They didn't flee. They froze. Freezing is one of the biggest predictors of the severity of your PTSD symptoms. Because from Peter Levine's perception, all of that energy is now stuck in your body. It was not able to be released. And every time you're triggered, it's that energy. Every time you have a flashback or an emotional flashback where you're re-experiencing emotion from the past, it's all of that energy dredging up in you, being like, I want to be released. I want to be released, but now in a different context. And so he has great exercises I profile in the book too, somatic experiencing. I don't know if you've talked about this already, but it's really about turning towards that feeling in the body and really focusing on where is the tension, where is the tightness. And as you do that feeling, actually, you start to feel it move through you. And you literally feel sort of like this energy moving through you as you attune to what's happening in your body. And so that's really the best method I've found for those of us whose low self-esteem might be, because when we were kids, Connor, the parent, wasn't like, you have big feelings, what's going on? Let me give you a hug. They were like, shut up, stop yelling. That we might have to do that body-based work of meeting the feeling where it lies, which is in the body. So we have to begin to feel into the body again.
Love that. Yeah, I had Peter on the show a year or two ago. He was great. I loved my conversation with him. What haven't we covered about the building blocks of self-worth? Any other pieces? Because I would like to leave men with maybe a few more strategies or frameworks from the perspective of, okay, I recognize that I don't have great self-worth. This is something that's important to me. I can see that, it's connected to these other aspects of my life.
Yeah.
We've talked about memory reconsolidation. We've talked about some of these other pieces. Anything else that a man can just begin to do or deploy to build that self-worth?
So there's this other theory that I really like called working memory theory, which is basically the idea that like our working memory, or the memories that we're kind of thinking about and using in this current moment, I might be thinking about, our interview right now, it's limited. So it's almost like we have limited RAM. And so we can't hold too many things in our current working memory at once. And so if we focus on a trigger while simultaneously focusing on something else, then that memory actually degrades because our brains can't hold these memories too well. It's like having like too many fruits in the fruit basket. So some of them start falling out. And so if we access the feeling of a trigger, I'm feeling triggered, I'm feeling a tightness in my throat, and you do things like play Tetris, which is research backed, count off by threes, for example. There's also things like tapping, you tap different parts of your body while you think about a trigger. EMDR, which is like a form of therapy where you watch a ball move back and forth while you think about something triggering, right? That's how those things work for degrading the underlying negative memory or the sensation that's a reflection of that negative memory. So now when I'm like triggered, I'll literally focus on the trigger and start counting off by threes to help me degrade that memory, knowing that I only have so much room for memory in my brain. And so if I multitask, it's actually going to help degrade the memory.
Awesome. Well, the book comes out in September. Worth, where can people find it? And where can people find more of you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Dr. Marisa G. Franco, sharing tips on relationships. DrMarisa GFranco. My website, drmarisagfranco.com. You can reach out for any speaking events, and you can really get the book Worth, The New Science of Self-Esteem and Secure Attachment anywhere books are sold. There's a bunch more exercises that we didn't get a chance to get to that can research back exercises that can really improve your sense of worth.
Awesome. We'll have the links for that in the show notes. As always, team, don't forget to man it forward. Share it with somebody that you think could use it or enjoy it. Maybe this is one of those episodes that you share with your significant other, have a conversation about it. I think that'd be a great one for you to dive into. And as always, until next week, Connor Beaton signing off.